Welcome back to The Hill's live election night coverage. I'm Robby Soave, host of Rising, and we are starting to get some tangible information, Nomiki, that might portend what direction the night is headed. So the state of North Carolina, a pivotal swing state, has been called, not by everyone, but by Decision Desk HQ, which is partnered with The Hill, has been called for Donald Trump. The New York Times has not called it, but now gives Trump, says it's likely Trump will win it. Also that it's likely Trump will win Georgia. He's up there +5. You know, these are not must-win states necessarily for Harris, but what I would say is that the avenues for Harris to have some creative way to still win if things go wrong in the blue wall states, that's going to become a dead end for her. She is getting to the place where she's going to have to hold Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin in order to be elected president. The kind of creative solutions, but what if she could lose Pennsylvania but win this other combination of states? I'm calling it right now. That's not going to happen. She has to win Pennsylvania to win this election.
And I think that's what they've always figured, is that she had to win Pennsylvania. And also, you know, they were hopeful about North Carolina. I'm still hopeful about North Carolina. You know, we have...
You think, but it's been called.
Well, it's been, there's some other stuff that...
Decision Desk HQ is going to have egg on their face tomorrow morning?
No, but all I'm saying is we have to keep in mind that they haven't started counting... you know, North Carolina usually counts very quickly, as the New York Times says, but early voting, for the first year ever, early voting did not start to be counted until the polls closed. And in other states, you know, Georgia's got a similar issue where they have to deal with overseas ballots, provisional ballots, and it's really tight right now. You have the same in Virginia. Many results may be reported by noon on Wednesday. Because they don't start counting the mail-in votes, it can be as far as 3 days out. So when you have the margins this small, it could come down to provisional ballots, overseas ballots, mail-in ballots. And in the case of North Carolina, I also think it's going to come down to Asheville, which is a very progressive, specifically progressive, like Democratic-leaning city that was hit so hard by the hurricane. And there's been concern over how many folks are going to be able to turn out to those polls and if that hurricane will affect the election. This is that kind of year, though. This is a year where micro communities, we were learning so much about geography and different communities within larger communities, they could determine the election. Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania, Asheville, North Carolina.
You bring up Virginia, where it is a very tight race still, and there's some hope and some reason to believe that in these counties that are right now leaning Trump in a very encouraging way for Republicans, that there's still ballots to come in that might tip things a little bit back toward Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris ahead in these counties, but not ahead by as much as Biden has been ahead by. And Virginia has been a state that surprised us in recent memory. I said when we were talking earlier, I think the Glenn Youngkin win there, doing actually well in the suburbs. A lot of frustration with Democratic policies relating to COVID in schools and everything. So if Trump were to somehow take Virginia from Kamala Harris and she hasn't made a pickup in she hasn't picked up North Carolina and she hasn't held on to Georgia, it's actually over. But she could win Virginia. She's still there's still a little bit. She's ahead there right now. New York Times has it as likely Democrat, even though Trump is ahead right now. So I think after this point, the map is going to we're going to see what happens on the West Coast, Arizona, Nevada, the Sunbelt states rather, closer toward in the direction of the West Coast, as you said. We're talking about geography here, and then we're going to return to the Midwest for the ultimate showdown.
Your land. I got to say, folks are really upset online about the Colin Allred, Ted Cruz race in Texas. It was really coming close, and Ted Cruz pulled it off. Surprise! Even without Mitch McConnell's help, anxiety. I mean, there's anxiety all around. That's one thing. We were looking on Twitter. We're looking for some interesting stuff to discuss, and it was kind of boring.
Yeah, what I'm picking up on, I'm sensing mounting Democratic nervousness that and mounting Republican overconfidence, which could be quickly reversed as it was last time when, we talked about the red mirage, when some of these early returns look favorable to conservatives, and then later you count the other stuff that is disproportionately Democrat, and you have things start to shift back the other way. Maybe Republicans are preparing themselves for that. Maybe Democrats are preparing for themselves for that. Who knows? Yes, you mentioned the Ted Cruz win in Texas. The GOP did get some disappointment in Maryland with Larry Hogan, a very moderate Republican, not warmly embraced by or embracing of Donald Trump, losing there to Angela Alsobrooks. So that will not be a Republican win. However, looking very closely at the Ohio Senate race, Bernie Moreno doing well there so far. A lot of the votes still to count, but that is looking like a very possible pickup, I think, for Republicans as well, in a difficult state that is increasingly red against Sherrod Brown, the incumbent.
I mean, it's a shame because Sherrod Brown has been such a great progressive working, fighter for working people.
Yeah, there was a period where he had pulled off the difficulty of being in a red state, but being someone who has credibility with union people, with working class people on sort of populist issues, labor issues, economic issues, while still being a Democrat and still associated with administration and a president and a policy that is increasingly culturally or vibes-based unpopular. Using the word vibes way too much in the last several days,
Energy,
weeks, episode of the show.
Momentum.
I'm going to start retiring that word.
Thesaurus.
Yeah, banning myself from saying it. But it has swam upstream or against the tide with how things are shifting in terms of the labor vote and the working class vote moving into the Republican column. I don't think it's going to be enough to overcome the challenge.
I sadly think you're correct. I think it's been that way. I mean, if you remember, he opted out of even going to the Democratic National Convention because he didn't want to lose a few days of campaigning. That's how tight it has been in Ohio. It's the demographics have shifted quite a bit. I also think, once again, no matter what happens, the Democrats are going to have an inflection point. And this is the drum that I've beaten for the last 10 years. I will not give up on it. The Democrats need to have party operations in every single state, because when you're not on the ground, you're basically, not doing it 24/7, you're basically giving the ground to Republicans, and they're winning the messaging wars. And especially in a race like this, where Kamala Harris only had 3 months to introduce herself to many voters, to talk about the issues that people care about, when Donald Trump has had 9 years to do this, and he has been doing it for 9 years. So Democrats, I gotta say, no matter what happens, we have to change our strategy. We have to start thinking about every single neighborhood, every single community, every single small race as an opportunity to talk about our messaging, what we care about. Because whether it was the legislatures being lost during the Obama years, or the Trump MAGA movement building from the ground up all across this country in lands that used to be more democratic, like the Rust Belt, we have to learn our lessons. And, that might even mean shaking it up with some of the staff that's been running things for the last few years.
Indeed. A lot of the staff running Democratic campaigns, if we go back to the Hillary Clinton loss, just some terrible shooting yourselves in the foot. Too much advice from elite young progressives, I think.
I wouldn't even say they're progressives.
Not progressive on the parts of progressivism that are popular, that I don't necessarily agree with, but I am willing to admit poll well, minimum wage, expanding Medicare, that kind of stuff. Again, not my policies, but I understand they poll well. What doesn't poll well is like using the pronoun Latinx or that kind of microaggressions or that kind of thing, and that's what the consultant-type people, Democrats, rely on, tell them to do. So we'll see if Democrats have to do soul searching tomorrow morning. Maybe not. We might not know by then, but we'll find out. The Hill's election night coverage continues. Stay with us.